So we're getting ready to go. I'm just talking to my camera. This is not the station camera. We're getting ready to go. I've got my two guests here. This is Alicia. I love that name.
Alicia.
Alicia.
Yes.
I said it wrong. Alicia.
Yes.
He told me. I'm blaming him. And then I'll pronounce Dale wrong. Dow. No.
Actually, usually people go with Bill.
So it's Alicia. No, it's
You are live.
Alicia.
You're live on all the cameras.
We're live on all the cameras. Hey, this is Rhonda Shea. Oh.
On all the cameras.
Oh, I'm just a
I didn't say
camera.
the radio.
I almost did the radio. See.
We're good. We're good. Everything's
Alicia,
fine.
and it's pronounced Alicia.
Elise.
Elise.
Yeah. Like
Elise.
a lease on a building.
That's what I'm going to do.
And then
Elise.
yeah.
Elise.
Alicia.
Yeah.
In Russian, you say Alicia.
Alicia.
Alicia. Yep.
Alicia. That's pretty. I like it.
Thank
Alicia.
you. It's very uncommon and it
Alicia.
causes me a lot of grief.
Thank you for joining us. You're on the WTF show starting right here at 3 p.m. If you want to patch right in, go ahead and patch right in into the audio portion if you don't want to watch any video. You can go to our website and see us live also there on the website, which we have a link right there for a video also, and then Facebook Live that you see right now. Also Facebook Live with Rhonda Shea. Take it away, Rhonda. I'm going to put you
You're
into
going to put me on live on the radio too?
on the radio
Okay,
too.
here we go. Hello and welcome to the WTF show. Today, instead of starting out with idiots assisting with the broadcast as our traditional thing, we're starting out with smart people. I have smart people in the studio, and we're gonna talk about an issue that is close to my heart because I grew up outside of the Rocky Flats nuclear facility, the former Rocky Flats nuclear weapons facility, and we are going to talk about an issue that continues today. And I'm going to give you a slight background. I'm going to introduce my two guests. Rocky Flats is a former nuclear weapons facility for those of you who are not from Colorado or new to Colorado. It began operation in 1953. It made plutonium triggers. Oh, you just bumped the mic. You're doing good. You're okay, Dale.
Stop touching.
Don't stop touching it. There we go. Anyway, former nuclear weapons facility. In 1953, it began operations under the contract with Dow Chemical. And all of us that grew up in the area thought they were making like scrubbing bubbles and stuff like that. But really, they were making plutonium triggers, literally hundreds of thousands of plutonium triggers, each one more powerful than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And throughout the years, particularly in certain years like 1957, early in the 60s, late 60s, there were meltdowns at the plant and fires that threw plutonium into the atmosphere, into the ground, into the water. And some of those meltdowns were greater than the meltdown at Chernobyl. And the public that lived surrounding there, myself included, had no idea. The government completely covered it up. We had no idea we were exposed to the plutonium and the other chemical wastes that we were exposed to that were dumped into our water supplies, dumped into the rivers and the lakes and the grounds where our cows ate. And at that time, because I'm old, you bought your food from the grocery stores, got the food from the local farmers. So it was in the food we ate and the water we drank, the places where we played. And so Rocky Flats is the biggest WTF in Colorado history. And today with me, I have two people who are going to talk to us a little bit about both the history of Rocky Flats then and now, what's going on now. Because, you know, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to know that it takes about 24,000 years to get rid of nuclear grade, weapon grade plutonium, and there were astronomical leaks. I mean, things were stored in barrels that rusted, things were put into blocks of cement that fell apart. We were lied to, and we are continuing to be lied to by our government. And the two reasons that I think this is an important show, and the reason that we stop the music, is because one, we need to know what's going on because it's our health. We live here, and our children live here. And two, if you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it. And for those of you that don't live in Colorado, if you assume that the changing in the EPA laws and the allowing of dumping and waste in states, whether it's coal mining or other things, that the government is going to do this and they're going to take care of you, wait till you hear this. They won't. Remember that when you go to the voting booth. Okay, so now with me today, I have two guests. Dale Simpson.
Hi there.
Hi, Dale. I'm so glad you could join me. And I'm going to try to say this right. Alicia.
Yes.
Oh, I did it. Alicia Case. And both Dale and Alicia are involved in the current lawsuit that was just filed with the federal government to stop opening up the lands on and around the nuclear facility, the former nuclear facility, for recreation purposes. So we're going to start. I'd like to ask you both to start and tell me a little bit about some of the history of Rocky Flats, some of the history of the spills, and why they're, because it was cleaned up, right? It was shut down. Everything's fine now. Why is
Sure.
it not fine? What's wrong?
Sure. Well, first off, just thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, just like you said, Rocky Flats was a nuclear weapons plant where they produced about 70,000. The estimate is about 70,000 plutonium pits, which are the triggers, the plutonium components for the nuclear bombs. And they had two significant events, which you talked about as well, which was the fire in 1957, and then they had another one, which was Mother's Day fire, which was 1969. And it's Mother's Day on Sunday.
There we
tomorrow.
go. The
So-
anniversary of nuking us.
Yeah, exactly. And both of these fires spread basically a nuclear fallout cloud over the Denver metro area, and it blew up over Broomfield and out into Nebraska.
Wow,
So-
I didn't know it went all the way to Nebraska.
Yes.
That's interesting. And what were there some measurements done? Do we know how much of that was?
Well, that's a great question. So it's really funny because actually what happened after the 1969 fire was that people started to wonder what was happening out there, and they sent some experts out to start sampling the soil, and they were finding all this, high, really above background limits of plutonium in the soil in the surrounding areas. And the plant then said, oh, no, that's not from the 1969 fire. That's actually from the 1957 fire.
Mm.
And so, and then that's when they said, well, 1957, wait a second, what's going on here? What don't we know? And that's when people really started to get involved. And so, after that, in the 60s, there were lots of other issues happening. The farmers in the area started to report their animals being impacted, like pigs born without legs, entire generations of turkeys born without beaks. So you started to see it in the livestock. Just
See,
like
now
you
I
were
remember
saying.
that
Yeah.
when I was a child. I remember because I had friends, and I know Dale, you're nodding right there. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I had friends that we lived in that area, and it was Arvada was much different. Then there was like 8,000, 10,000 people. There were a lot of kids that had the farmland surrounding that came in the school system. And I remember hearing those rumors about the turkeys born with no beaks, and and you weren't sure if they were true or they were rumors, or because they really hid everything from us. But and so they still continued to feed us on those food products, which was great.
Right.
Dale, tell me what you think about. I know you were earlier before the show started. You were discussing with me the Chernobyl incident compared to Rocky Flats and the contamination at Rocky Flats. Let's bring that up real quick.
Okay, so one of the most interesting things I feel is following the 69 fire, when the site got all of the scientific attention. That would be the very beginning of when the scientists would start to disagree with their own numbers. So one of the studies that came out of that is very well known, Cray Hardy. That was the one that showed, as I was telling you before the show, that showed that the actual plutonium release was approximately 10 times greater than that at Chernobyl.
And that just that literally makes me sick.
Oh yeah.
It's ridiculous. Because all of us, nobody knew.
Right.
They didn't tell us.
Right.
Oh, hey, we have a meltdown. Let's shh. Let's keep it quiet.
Right.
Let's keep making our bombs, and
Yeah.
let's keep our business going so we can make money. Thank you, Dow Chemical.
Yeah.
Was it Dow Chemical at that time?
Yes.
It wasn't Rocky Flats, right? It was Dow Chemical. I mean, it wasn't Rockwell. It was Dow.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so Rockwell didn't come in until the 80s.
Mhm.
And so then in the 70s, in 1978, they had the Truth Force, the Rocky Flats Truth Force, went and occupied the railroad tracks.
Oh, yes, I remember
and
that.
so that was when national attention started to be brought to that it wasn't a cleaning company, and
Yes.
that it was a weapons facility. And so they stopped all the shipments of waste in and out, waste and other materials in and out of the Rocky Flats facility. And so already think about 70,000 triggers. You think about how much
Oh my
waste is created when they machine one of those triggers down. They use like a beryllium solution, which would help keep it cool. And so all of this waste was just stacking up on the site. They had so much waste, it was just everywhere. And so they left it outside, which, as you said, leaked into the ground on the 903 pad. And they sprayed, they had dilution is the solution to the pollution. And
Oh,
that was
dear
their
God.
philosophy. And so they had spray fields, and they would hook up the barrels of waste to irrigation, and they would spray it out on the fields
Oh
for
my
it to evaporate into the environment.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So there's spray fields that are well known out there, and so all of this was going on. And finally, what happened in 1989? The EPA and the FBI partnered together, and they raided the plant. This was the first time two government agencies had ever partnered together to raid another government agency. And so they raided the plant. They shut down production, and then after, I think it was 1993, they officially shut it down and began this Superfund cleanup and all of that. So,
And I think it's interesting that it took the FBI to step in. Thank God for the FBI. They step in and even against public opinion, because there were many people that I grew up around that just didn't believe this. Oh, the government would never do that. They would never lie to us like that. They would never. Well, we all know that that's not true, because they did exactly that. But the FBI stepped in and the EPA stepped in, two agencies that, frankly, many, many people in this area owe their health to. So they stepped in and they helped to facilitate getting that place closed and getting that place cleaned up. Well, I'm going to say cleaned up.
right.
It's not really cleaned up. And that's what we're going to talk about. So we've done a
Yeah,
little bit of the
yeah.
history. I think what the point here is that they dumped waste. They put it in barrels that were rusted out and leaked. They sprayed it. I didn't know that, onto
Yeah.
the fields. The animals, I mean, that's another thing, because you can say, well, it was only in this area, except bunnies and rabbits and antelopes and snakes and things. They don't know boundaries and fences. So
Right.
they would dig up and they'd run around, they'd get it on their feet. And the rabbits were a big issue. And then they'd take it across the highway and down the road and into people's yards, and particularly in that northeast or that northwest area of like Arvada and places like that. So let's move on and talk about the cleanup a little bit, or the lack of it, or what they did and what they
That's
didn't
more
do.
accurate.
Yeah, it's pretty. I know that there were issues because of the amount of money, so they cut corners. They decided to only go 3 feet deep in certain areas. They didn't do it at all in some areas. So let's talk a little bit about what happened with the cleanup. Give us some that in a nutshell. Dale, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so basically, money ruled everything. When the government set out to go ahead and do the largest Superfund cleanup in the world, it was estimated to take,
Well, yeah, it was going to take 40 plus years, and
and the cost
was around, I think it was 50 or 60 billion dollars.
And that
See,
is
I
in
was thinking
19.
40.
I mean, that's 20 years
Oh,
ago.
wait,
Dollars.
maybe it was
Yeah.
40.
yeah, so
That's when a dollar was worth 50 cents instead.
Right.
exactly. So, long story short, with incentive bonuses being offered, they had to come up with a much quicker way to go ahead and meet everybody's agreed upon goals. And so they were able to do it. And it
Yeah,
took
they
them,
did it in less than 10 years for under 7 billion.
Wow.
And so I'll
Yeah.
tell you what they did. They buried it in place.
Oh.
So all of those buildings are still there. Those infinity rooms
They didn't
are
haul
still
them off
there.
like we thought. They dug holes and just put them in the ground.
There was some waste. So my dad worked there as part of the cleanup,
Okay.
and so I have firsthand information of what was actually happening.
Okay.
And so the every time they would go to remediate an area, they kept finding more barrels, because there was just barrels. They were
I know.
drowning in barrels of waste. And like my dad has this great story. He came into work one day, and he drove into the parking lot, and where he had parked the day before was all cordoned off, guys in hazmat suits,
Oh my
and
God.
they were digging up barrels from underneath the asphalt that he had been parked on the day before. And because they had literally buried the barrels underneath the asphalt, paved over it, and people were parking on it.
Wow.
So, and here's the thing. They only remediated what they found.
Okay.
So, and the other thing is they didn't remediate, they buried it. They collapsed the buildings and they buried it.
And one thing I would add to that, my stepfather worked in cleanup at the plant. And one of the last things he ever told me is, there are for sure barrels out there they never even knew about.
Oh, sure. And I've heard that they didn't just stay within that the actual
Superfund site. at the
Superfund
center,
site,
Yeah.
that they went out in the buffer zone.
Right.
And they hid things in the buffer zone,
Right.
and they hid things out, outside of those areas as well. And so the cleanup people would maybe not even know where some of that
Right.
stuff was. So let's be realistic. I mean, there's two things I will give. I don't give a lot of leeway to this situation because it was brutal, and it's been brutal on people I know, and health issues and cancer and all types of things. But when initially in 1953, I don't believe people really knew the ramifications of this. So I can see an initial lack of understanding and lack of what we would consider today care with that waste, because
Yeah.
they didn't know.
Yeah.
But once they knew, they lied and covered up what had been done and what they were currently doing. And that's
That's
where
right.
the problem came in. The lack of transparency once they knew.
Right.
I mean, they didn't know. I have friends whose fathers worked there. We've had Girl Scout troops out there, and they would let them put your hand in that thing and hold the.
Yeah, the glove box. That's what you were saying.
It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they didn't know. It's clear they didn't know at
Yes.
that point.
I think
But
that's
they
right.
did know at some point.
Right.
And they continued with the cover up, and that's where I think the problem lies. That's where, and that cover up was not just with Dow Chemical. It was not just with Rockwell. It was with the government.
Yes.
The government's consent on this cover up. They even indemnified them so they couldn't be sued if it was found out. So
Yes, I
You
mean, and there's a couple of things. The first thing, so we're scratching the surface. We're starting to talk about the fact that the cleanup was very inadequate, and we're talking about weapons grade plutonium that has a half-life, just a half-life of 24,000.
24,000 years.
So by the time it's actually neutralized, we're looking at close to 1,000,000 years before
Right.
it's
So
actually neutralized.
there will be
and safe.
dust. I mean, the
Yes.
planet will be dust.
Yes, exactly.
Especially
So-
if all those lack of EPA rules come in.
So we have all this stuff that has a half-life of 24,000 years. So it's not just going away.
Right.
And they've buried it under between what you said, 3 and 6 feet of soil, and they've paved over some portions of that with a clay containment cap. And this is supposed to last
1,000,000 years.
1,000,000 years.
How long was that containment cap
Oh, yeah.
working?
And then so after the 2013 flood, for many people
Right.
who were here in 2013, which is 5 years ago, and we had the 1,000-year flood in Colorado.
Yes.
It was phenomenal. It was all over. And so after that, they started having above allowable limit exceedances of americium, plutonium, vinyl tetrachloride, a whole bunch of other things coming out of Rocky Flats. And then also the containment cap slumped, cracked, broke, washed away.
But it was supposed to last 1,000,000 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so that's what we have to get people over the hump, like, because everybody thinks like, oh, but it's clean. They did the cleanup, and
You couldn't pay me to set foot on that ground. I mean, you could offer me $1 million, I would not set foot on that ground.
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely a crime. I don't even think it's wrong. I think it's a criminal act that they built Candelas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a criminal act.
Yeah.
I think the Flatirons area,
Yeah.
that was not supposed to be built
Yeah.
on because of the nuclear waste. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
So
and the
let's-
airport out there.
And the
you
airport.
You can even go a step further and say pretty much the Church Ranch area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, all of those things. And the reason that's so dangerous isn't just because you're living in that. It's that when they dig the soil up, they dig up all the particles. And it just takes one, folks. One little teeny microscopic particle.
Right.
In the
And-
wind, and you will get some weird thing. It might take a few years to
Yeah,
get to you. But you'll get
Exactly.
it.
Because it's an alpha emitter, right? It's not a gamma radiation that goes
Uh-huh.
right through you. It
And
is
it's not a beta.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
This is weapons grade plutonium. Is there such a thing as safe or acceptable levels of exposure to weapons grade plutonium?
Absolutely.
That's what the DOE and the state would want you to believe. The CDPHE is paid for by the DOE.
Oh
It's
my
the fox guarding the hen house.
Yep, that's exactly right. Now, Dale,
Yes.
what do you think should happen? What I know the lawsuit was filed because we're trying to protect our generations now. But people like me, we're already screwed. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but I'm a cancer survivor, no history of it in my family. But we swam. I was saying we swam in Stanley Lake, which is where they put a lot of the tailings into. In fact, we used to jump off that pipe, and that pipe brought all the waste from Rocky Flats, and so we were swimming in a nuclear cesspool. That's what we were doing. We swam in a nuclear cesspool. We ate food from that area. And I can tell you numerous people that I knew that lost a leg as a child or lost a parent to a weird brain cancer or got leukemia. I mean, before I was 11 years old. And that's unusual back years ago. So tell me, Dale, what do you think? What has to be done to protect the public today? What do we need to do to protect ourselves today from this?
Well, ultimately, I think what will eventually occur, and hopefully it'll be within our lifetimes, history has already shown us that we've had two different public health officials involved in the matter recommend going ahead, fencing off half of our data and the area around the plant. That's ultimately what we're going to have to do.
And what part of our VAT are they talking about fencing off?
It's slightly hard to describe because it's not, yeah, it's more circular than a big rectangle, but it would go for the Arvada portion from the north side of Rocky Flats south to 64th. Then when you're looking at eastward, it can go as far as Wadsworth.
Wow, and that's right where I grew up.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, and by fencing off, what does that mean? Would they condemn the houses? Have people move?
Yeah. And people think that is such an absurd thing to say.
Yeah, people are going to go, oh, no way, I grew up there, I'm just fine.
Right.
Right. There are several examples in our history where the government has finally had to go ahead and do it.
Wow, that is just amazing. What do you think? Tell me about the lawsuit. There's a current lawsuit that was just filed.
Correct.
And in federal court, I believe.
Yes.
Right? So
Well,
let's talk a little bit about
The
this.
state's district court.
State district court. Okay.
So basically, as plaintiffs, our argument is that the government figured out or otherwise creatively bypassed environmental laws and regulations to go ahead and get their refuge, to get the tollway to go through the area. And we're basically saying, no, let's, for right now, take a step back and go ahead and get everything in compliance with the laws you should have already followed.
Okay, that makes sense. And now this didn't happen. I'm going to be fair. I'm not a Trump fan. Everybody knows that watches my show. But I'm going to be very fair on this. This is not a Trump administration issue. This started before then. So I don't want people to misinterpret that.
That's right. Yeah.
This started a
And
long
Well,
time
so
ago.
as
I was going to say,
Yeah.
environmental hazard should never be looked at as either a Democrat or
Right,
a
that's what
Republican
it is
issue.
not a partisan issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is
And it's
environmental.
particularly not due to the regulations that have been laxed
Yeah.
by this administration. So these are things that were ignored
Yes.
by multiple administrations.
That's
And if anything, I doubt that that's something they're looking at this point. But what I will say is that I think history repeats itself. And if we don't hold our government officials to the feet to the fire, we don't investigate, we don't use our resources like the FBI and the EPA to protect us, then this is what they'll do to you, folks.
Yep.
They will do it because they did it,
Yep.
and they're still doing it.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. When I had a gentleman come out a couple of years ago that I interviewed who worked with The Guardian in the UK, and he was specializing in writing a book on these nuclear sites around the planet. And he was flabbergasted about what is happening in Colorado and how we're just ignoring and allowing such huge development out there. And he was like, they don't do this in Russia. They don't do this around Chernobyl. They protect their citizens. They've actually tracked and follow all of their citizens. They know exactly how healthy they are and what they're doing. And here it's like, go right ahead. And there's no signage. There's nothing out there that says former nuclear weapons plant, radionuclides present, recreate at your own risk.
It's okay.
Like none of that is there. It's just, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Green space.
And
Beautiful.
if you look
Come
at
on out.
if you look at the growth of Colorado from the 90s to today, we're double, triple in
yes,
many
yep,
cases,
yep.
quadruple in many cities that are affected by this, and the new people have no idea because
Right.
it's just nobody talks about it.
Right.
It's and I'm sorry, and I don't mean to bash on Candelas, because if you bought a home out there, I feel bad for you. I really do, and not just because you bought a home out there, because I believe you're in great health risk, and also your property value. As sooner or later, this is all going to come out. It's going to be rough. So if you're looking for a house, I sure as heck wouldn't go out there.
Right.
Don't they have to sign papers?
No.
No. So
No?
the disclosures, and so on my website, candelasglows.com, you can go and read the
Let's
actual.
say that slower. Candelas Glows.
Candelasglows.com is the group that I'm with, and that's our website. There's also another one that has more facts about the general area, not just the housing area, and that's rockyflatsglows.com. And so both of these sites have great information if you guys are wondering about it. But so on the Candelas Glows website, we have a copy of the disclosures. that the homeowners must sign, and they are acknowledging that they are moving in to a property that is adjacent to a wildlife refuge.
Oh my God.
You can't make this up.
That's criminal.
Yeah.
That's absolutely
Yeah.
criminal.
Oh,
I mean,
well,
they're moving into property where the cows had 3 legs and the pigs had no feet, because
Right.
those were the farms that were affected.
Yep.
Right where they are the farms that had that happen.
so
Yep.
to go right along with that, in the advertising material that Candelas uses to woo new home buyers, they include letters where they had engineers do soil sampling
Yes.
for beta radiation.
But
Yeah.
it wasn't beta radiation, right?
Exactly.
Was it alpha?
Yes.
Yeah, it was alpha radiation.
So they didn't even
explain the
test for it.
difference between beta and alpha for people who may not know.
Do you want to take it?
No.
No.
I'm not a nuclear scientist. I mean, I do know, well, so like a gamma is radon.
Yes.
And so that's actually, and I thought gamma and beta were similar.
Well, yeah, they are definitely similar. There's a lot of differences in what their field can penetrate
Right.
through.
That's
Okay.
exactly right. Yeah.
Another thing is beta and gamma are less likely to stick around in the human body.
Right.
or a
They'll
human
pass through.
If
organism.
you
Yes.
get a particle of radiation in your body, let's say that, I don't know, one of those times when we were drinking beer and jumping in Stanley Lake and ditching school, that some of that water got in my mouth or my eyes or whatever and got into my system. How long does that take to get out?
Okay, so the body's actually, we're going to have to use 10 particles as an example. So let's say you've consumed 10 particles. Within the
How
first,
big's a particle? Is it like
uh,
microscopic, teeny weeny, like
Yes.
Yes,
We're talking
very
like a
microscopic.
like you need
picocurie.
that big, what is
is
that,
a
kaleidoscope
trillion.
thing?
Yes, exactly. It's a
To look at.
trillionth. A picocurie is a trillionth.
A
And
trillion.
so, and
I was going to say, and isn't a fatal dose, like the amount you could see, just a pin?
A pinhead is a fatal dose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is a trillionth of that.
Yes.
Oh my
Oh, yeah.
gosh.
So
Okay.
when the human body gets 10 particles in it,
Mhm.
within the first couple of days, you digested and eliminated 9 out of 10 of those particles.
Okay.
That other particle, good luck.
and so typically it settles either in the bones or the gonads. So reproductive organs are impacted, or your bones, because it's a heavy metal.
So bone cancer is one of the results of
Yes,
this. Okay.
absolutely. And
So-
so we know a lot of workers that are sick or have taken a full body burden.
And
they're-
explain that for people. Full body burden.
A
you just-
full body burden is something that is you've reached your max amount of radiation exposure for like your entire
life.
life in one instance.
Right. So like when I had my radiation for my cancer, I know that you can only have so much of that, and then they say, nope, you can't have any more. That's it.
Yep.
And so
That's-
that's
yeah.
a full body burden. Okay.
And just so people are clear, the last criticality that happened out there was 2003.
Wow, that's
And so-
much more recent history than people
Yes,
think. Yeah.
yes, and so that was part of the cleanup. They had some particles that got too close together, and so they had another fire. And Randy Sullivan was the chief of the Rocky Flats Fire Department, and he took a full body burden that day.
Wow.
And we've heard through family members that he's not doing well, and his hips are dissolving.
Oh my God, that's just horrible. That's horrible. So what can the public do? What do you need to do? What can we do to help this cause, to say, hey, let's at least educate people. If you want to buy a house out there, great. I always thought they should put like 60 plus housing out at Candelas, because it takes like 20 years to kill you. By then you're all
Right.
dead.
I know that's right. No,
It
I
doesn't
think
matter,
that's right.
you know.
Yeah.
But if you're a young family, you might want to think about it. Somebody my age could probably move out of Candelas, just be fine. You know?
Right,
Unless
right.
it-
Yeah, but you wouldn't want the grandkids to come
Yeah,
visit.
that's right. That's right. But what I want to say is, what can people do? What recourse is available? What's recourse available to people who were duped and they don't know?
Right.
What-
So, one of the greatest campaigns that we've had that's been super effective is we've been speaking to all of the school boards in the Denver metro area and letting them know that it's a former nuclear weapons plant. It's a active Superfund site at the center of the wildlife refuge that they are looking to open this summer. I don't know if we made that really clear why we're
This summer.
outraged this summer. So Fish and Wildlife, part of the Rocky Flats Land Management Act, when the Superfund site was declared finished or closed, or I don't want to say clean because we all know it's not. So they they passed the land over to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so U.S. Fish and Wildlife now has it as a wildlife refuge, and they want to open it up for recreation. And that's supposed to happen this summer, which is what the lawsuit is about. It's saying you guys didn't do the right soil sampling and scientific study in order to prove that it's safe, so you can't open it.
And I heard that they ignored some studies that were currently done.
Absolutely. Yes.
There were a
Yeah.
lot of data that they just didn't take into consideration.
Exactly. So we've been successful in convincing many of the school boards around the Denver metro area to ban school-sanctioned field trips to the wildlife refuge.
Parents, this is what you can do. If you don't want your kids playing in a nuclear cesspool, a former nuclear cesspool, you can talk to your principals and at school and say you don't want a field trip. And if they do a field trip, don't let your kids go. I
Absolutely.
mean, you don't have to let them go.
Yes.
Don't let them go. It's not safe. And if one child out of 1,000 gets that one particle and they lose a leg or they lose their life, God forbid, it's it's too many. It's
Right.
one
I
too
agree.
many.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
So it doesn't matter that if you lived there your whole life and you didn't get it. If your neighbor got it, your friend's mother got it, or you have children that were born
Yep.
with issues, then it does matter.
Yes.
And,
No, that's
And-
exactly right.
Very, very pleased to report that as of right now, with the current population modeling in the Denver metro, there's 300,000 students who will not be able to go there. And
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
that's great news. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think we owe you a debt of gratitude for that. Thank you very much. So what can they do? Can they donate? Can they be a part of this? Can they protest? What can the average
Absolutely.
person do?
That was the next thing I wanted to say is get out there, get in action, get in touch with us. There's a couple of groups. There's the Rocky Flats Right to Know group, which is one of the groups that I help support. We have a monthly meeting in Arvada for the community that is impacted by this. It's the fourth Thursday of every month, and it happens at Trinity Church on 80th and Watts. And anybody's welcome. Come down, meet with us. We have all sorts of different campaigns. Some of us are going to DC at the end of this month to lobby. Then there's also the Candelas Glows group. You can get in touch with me through the website, and I can put you into action on. We've got a couple different campaigns as well. And the biggest thing that we're gearing up for is we are ready to lay down and protest the opening of this.
And I will join you. If you
Yeah.
lay down and protest, I will join you. I did
Yeah.
it when I was 1978. I went out with friends.
Right.
I had friends that chained themselves to things.
That's
And
awesome.
I will go with you, and I will lay with you, and I will broadcast from there. And
That
you'll
is
let me.
awesome. Thank you.
And because it is that important.
And
Yes.
I was going to go ahead and say that really the most important thing people can do is their own activism. Letting other people who you can tell don't know, get them informed with
Right.
the facts.
Because knowledge is power. And at least let's not let, and for those of you that don't live in Colorado, that like I said many times, the takeaway from this story is it can happen to you.
Mhm.
Oh,
So be
And it
aware
is
of what's
happening.
going on in your area. Be aware of those
Mhm.
facilities that they build that have, whether it's government or private industry, that have dangerous waste,
Yep.
that have chemicals that they're putting into
Yep.
your land and into the ground. Because you might think, oh great, I've got a job and my family's got a job and we're all happy because of the job's there. But let me tell you something, that happiness goes away pretty damn quick if you have a kid born with no legs.
And be wary of the
I mean, I don't mean
EPA.
that you'd be unhappy with your
Yes.
child. What I
Right.
mean is that you would sit there and go, wow, I sacrificed this for my paycheck, or I sacrificed this, and they lied to me.
Mhm.
So the reality is that, you truly, all of that is kind of a bubble. And hopefully you never have that bubble burst, but you do not want to allow this type of thing to happen. And the only way to do that is to do your research, get out there, listen.
Yep.
And folks, think differently. Because if you think the government will not pull something like this on you, think again.
Right.
Yeah.
And be wary of the EPA, because the EPA is famous for putting corporate profits ahead of human health.
Absolutely. And
And
that's
it's-
not just now, that's
Yes.
history of it.
Yes, and as long as we continue to operate in a society that advocates for that, we have some big battles ahead of us.
Oh, yeah.
And the EPA has a history, and we've seen this in Flint with the lead water crisis.
Absolutely.
And we've seen this. The other nuclear communities are Hanford in Washington.
Hmm.
There's the St.
Savannah.
Louis with the Minecraft,
Right.
and the Westlake landfill. There's downwinders in New Mexico. There's downwinders in Arizona. There's downwinders in Nevada. Anywhere they did nuclear testing. So all of these communities, what happens is the EPA goes in and they look and they say, what's here? Oh, that's the levels of background. That's the new acceptable limit.
Oh, they changed the limits. So
They changed
to
the
fit-
limits.
To fit the
Again, they
situation.
constantly raise it.
Mhm.
And so you think you're safe because it's under the allowable limit, but you go elsewhere that doesn't have nuclear background that high, and the background and allowable limit is much lower.
Wow.
And as a local example, with Rocky Flats, we have seen the state of Colorado, they have multiplied their original radiation limits for residential land over 10-fold.
Oh my gosh. So let's back this up. Let's
Okay.
back that bus up.
Right.
Okay. So when did that happen? Over a period of time? When did it start?
I am not positive on the exact dates, but it would have been the 70s and early 80s.
It doesn't surprise me because that's when it all got stirred
Yeah.
up, literally and figuratively. So they raised the limits over 10 times
Yes.
since that. Oh,
Well, yeah, so-
wow.
For example, let's say the original maximum allowed was 0.2. They immediately upped it to 2.0. And that was, of course, during a population boom for the Denver metro area.
Sure.
They needed more land.
Yeah, that's interesting, and sad, very sad.
Yeah.
What do you think, besides the plutonium? We're talking about plutonium radiation. What do you think the most dangerous chemical is outside of that? You have an idea?
There's other
So there's over
radionuclides.
1,000 different chemicals that have been listed by the Department of Labor and that are existing out there.
Because I know some of it might be the chemical dump, not just the radiation dump,
Yes.
but the chemical dump that went into the land, and
I
that's
mean-
causing cancers as well.
Yeah, the beryllium. I mean,
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
beryllium,
that's
because
one of the
brutal
other.
stuff.
And then americium, which is a daughter product.
What about the vinyl?
Yeah, and then the vinyl tetrachlorides
Yeah.
there's tons of VOCs.
So there's over 1,000 chemicals that were part of this, and those chemicals, some of the leaks, let's kind of back that were in the barrel, were actually waste that was the chemical waste from this.
Yes.
And so even if you took the plutonium out of the picture, even if you say, okay, I believe the government, I believe they cleaned it up, yeah, I believe in Santa Claus and everything else, but if you believe that, the chemical waste that leaked into the land was enough to cause some of the mutations and some of the health issues in terms of cancer and everything else. And those chemicals were the ones that most likely, I've read, a lot of those chemicals were put into the creek and into the reservoirs and things of that nature. So,
Correct. And another thing to keep in mind with everything that's seeped into the ground, the state of Colorado and the EPA are both very aware that there is an underground large plume of chemicals and other toxic waste, and it's slowly moving off the site.
wow, and which direction is that moving?
To the south and to the east.
So southeast, so from Rocky Flats it's moving towards Arvada,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
first stop,
north part of Arvada. Yeah.
first stop, Kindellis.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So what happens if, now I've heard rumors, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard if you live in that area, you can't dig the garden up. Is that true?
We've heard this rumor. We have not been able to substantiate it.
Okay, so that may not be.
But we have heard, and I've seen the disclosures for the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, which is another weapons into wildlife, which is literally what the government calls it. That the wildlife refuge at the Arsenal, they have super thick disclosures that they are actually
So
prevented.
if you
from
live there, you're
digging.
not allowed to dig and
Yes.
plant gardens and
That's
grow food
correct.
and things like that.
Yes.
Well, that at least they tell you.
Right.
Now, was the arsenal part of this? I mean, was some of the nuclear waste buried at the arsenal? Why is the arsenal? Do you know anything about that contamination?
The only thing I know more specifically is about the toxic chemical weapons.
Oh, the chemical. That's what it is. Yeah.
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 So I'm sure there's some sort of history between the two that overlaps.
But we don't know that.
Yeah, but
we probably
that's
never will.
government.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, years ago, there were people that were involved, like the former health official for Jefferson County that said, "Hey, this is bad," and then he, was
That would be
ousted.
Dr.
Carl Johnson.
Carl
Yeah,
Johnson.
tell us
Yep.
a little bit about that and what Carl found and what happened to him.
Sure. So Carl Johnson was the head of the Jefferson County Health Department, and he came out and started doing some soil sampling and studies on the cancer rates in the area. And he concluded that no one should be living within 10 miles of the plant.
Wow.
And so
And that's before a lot of people lived 10 miles.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you-
If
I
they
mean-
would have listened to him, you wouldn't have had a lot of this problem.
exactly,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
That was in a period of time, 1981,
Right.
when the closest real subdivisions would have been like 80th and Wadsworth.
Wow.
Everything else was the rural, multi-acre lots,
Right. Right.
farmland, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's right. So, and after he came out with that, because it's all about the money, right?
Oh, yeah.
These
I'm sure it's-
developers are making billions. So, he
And
was
they don't have any homes there. I wonder if there are
Right.
any developers that
actually live there.
I would say if you're going to develop, you have to bring your family and live there for 10 years.
Amen.
That'd probably stop it right there.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
it's fine, you can do it, but all of you guys have to live there.
It's like in Flint when they brought him the water and said, "Drink the water."
Yeah, drink the water.
Yeah, and so anyway, Carl was removed from his position and actually posthumously won a lawsuit that a whistleblower lawsuit
Well,
was
that's
granted
awesome.
in his favor that said absolutely he was correct, and unfortunately he had passed by then and it was many years later, but he had small victory.
Well, yeah, but at least it was a victory. Let's talk about some of the other lawsuits that have paid off because there have been like millions and millions of dollars paid out. And if that doesn't tell you that this is a real problem, I don't know what does. Friends of mine have received settlements. They received big settlements for the, I guess, for property value and issues like that. So what other lawsuits have been settled? I know there was the church lawsuit.
Okay, so yeah, the church,
Family. It's a church family, not a church. Like you
Yeah.
go to church and pray. It's a church family.
my apologies.
Which is the Church Ranch Boulevard is
Yeah,
named after.
named after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
This was a very, very intelligent family. They knew what they were doing. They were very blessed to own millions of acres of
Right,
land.
right.
They had finally reached the point, I want to say the 70s was when it started.
I think it did. I think I remember that. It was the
Okay,
70s, yeah.
so they went ahead and sued the federal government and basically said all of your contamination has made any and all land use we should have of our land impossible.
Yeah.
They would ultimately win like just shy, it was in between $9 and $10 million.
Yeah, they want a lot of
Yeah.
money.
And that's back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
But then get this, if you want to talk about double dipping, here we are, 30 years later, they've gotten to re-profit by going ahead and actually working with the developers
Oh.
to get all the subdivisions out there.
Wow. That's kind of sad.
On the same land that was too damaged for them to do anything.
So they won 8 million. Okay, I'm not a fan of them anymore. That's it. They're up.
Yeah.
So they won $8 million because they'd never be able to use their land.
Yep.
Correct.
It's too contaminated. We can't use it. It's it's done. And then they waited 20 years and they said, let's develop the land.
Yeah.
And they used their $8 million to develop the land and stick people who didn't know anything about it on the land and risk their health while they're retired somewhere like Florida. Over there. That's great. Hey, church family, way to go.
Yes.
I think you should, outstanding
Brilliant.
citizens. Outstanding citizens.
It really is. You've got to give them credit for
We're
how
not
they
sure
did
how
it.
they sleep at night, but
Yeah, really.
oh, on a pile of cash.
On a pile of cash far away from the nuclear.
Yeah.
So now, to talk about the homeowner settlement, I'll
Yes.
let you start. to
So the
start.
settlement was $375 million. It took, oh God, like 26 years before they finally settled. It had been much higher.
And I forgot to put my house in there. I didn't realize
Oh,
it.
no,
Yeah,
that there
I
was
know.
a deadline.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was-
no,
there was a deadline. I
You're
was
not
like,
the
oh.
only one. But there were a lot of people that tried and didn't also. $375 million was awarded to people who lived in the area during the 80s when the contamination was happening. Not happening because it was happening since the 50s. But so But basically, I think it was people who had lived there during the raid in 1989. So
Yeah, if you
that
had
was the
property,
home.
that's
Yeah,
where
exactly.
the home that my mother lived in. we had.
exactly, exactly. So I actually have a close friend whose mother, they lived on the shores of Stanley Lake.
Mhm.
She went to Pomona High. And so her mother had survived breast cancer and bladder cancer.
Mhm.
And I will tell you that their 40,000 that they got for the two different houses they had over there was paltry compared to the medical expenses.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Didn't even come close.
So I mean, yeah, maybe people are winners, but most of those winners have medical expenses like you would not believe, trying to fight off the cancers from the exposures that they've had in that area.
Yeah,
And I just want to clarify that the amount was a highly contested one. That's part of what dragged the legal battle on and on and on over. At one point, the original award for the homeowners was just shy of $1 billion.
Wow. Wow. Now, my understanding is it was based on if you had a home in that area because your property value was messed up or something. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's another one coming down the pipe for people who've had cancer.
Yes, yes.
Is that?
That's
Let's
correct.
talk about that. So if you've had cancer, you grew up in that area, you may be able to get in on that one.
Yeah. There's a couple of health ones, and we'll have to talk offline about that because
Okay.
Okay.
I do know some people that are
Okay. Because I understand that there's several of those coming up too. So and you can find out about these. I know that Metro did the health study. Because I know I
Yes.
participated in that. Is that
Yes,
ongoing?
it's
So if you grew
ongoing.
up in the area, you can go to Metro. And,
Yeah, so it's
Online.
RockyFlatsDownwinders.com.
Right.
And they partnered with Metro. I think some of the people that have Metro have now gone over to DU, so DU is actually
Oh,
running
that's
it.
great.
So, but
Cool.
yeah, so it continues to be state, university, MRB, IRBs, which are they go through all the approvals to
Right, right. It has to be
legitimize it. Exactly,
legitimate
exactly.
study. Right.
So, but ooh, I mean, just preliminary data. In 2016, they released. They looked at the cancers that people had self-reported on the survey, and they found that 49% of the cancers were extremely rare, like super weird cancers.
Right. They were a rarer form of cancer than the typical. So, for
And the
example,
national average
yeah.
is only like 29% are rare.
They were rare forms of breast cancer.
Yes.
They were rare
Yes.
forms of brain cancer. They
Exactly.
were rare forms of leukemia, bone
Exactly.
cancer, and either rare by the age that people got them or by the types of
The
cancer.
types of cancers. Yes.
And one other thing they've been able to point out so far with the limited data pool that they are working with is that in Colorado and every state nationwide, you should be able to fairly accurately predict what your top 5 cancers are going to be.
Right.
In our area, they're not in that order. We have a very, very unique order. And
Which puts thyroid
Oh, yeah,
as number
thyroid's big.
2, where nationally it's number 9.
And I heard there was some brain cancer that
Yes.
were quite rare. So, and it's hard to say if you'd get it or you wouldn't get it. So, some cancers, like I had a very typical breast cancer. Now, no one in my family had it, but they call it environmental. So I don't know what that means, but I took it to mean it was Rocky Flats. But it'd be hard to prove that because so many people do get it. I would say if you grew up in that area, I do have a friend that had breast cancer and she couldn't get radiation because when they went to check her, she already had a full body burden of radiation. She never had it in her life before, and all of a sudden she has too much radiation to have radiation. So that was kind of interesting. What you want to do is always be checked anyway, whether or not you grew up in that area. I mean, obviously you want to do the right things to check for various types of cancers when you're supposed to check for them. But if you grew up in that area, I would strongly suggest that you get those tests, and you are diligent and you're vigilant about getting your mammograms, getting your colonoscopies, getting anything that you need to get done that's suggested, you get it done. Don't
I
delay.
just want to say for the guys, because it is quite common out there, you definitely have to do the testicular
Oh,
shot.
that's right. And I have a friend that got that too at a young age.
I have a brother with it, yeah.
And it's who ever heard of this? I mean, so many people had weird kinds of cancers, and and particularly, like I said, the ones that were when you're young. I mean, and it's younger and younger and younger, and that's happening nationally. And that's probably because we have a lot of chemicals in our life now, and we have a lot of issues. But I would say that if you are at risk, if you grew up in that area and you're living in that area, you are at risk. So do not just put it off. No cancer in my family. I don't need to go in. I don't need to get my mammogram. I don't need to do this. I don't need. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Thank you for that. I think that's really important. Yeah.
So what's going on with the lawsuit? Anything? We just filed it. Has there been any movement?
So yeah, it's too fresh at this point to really have any measurable movement with it. I wish it would have been filed earlier so we would have information for you.
Okay, that's all right.
Not yet.
We'll get there. One of the things that I'll tell you is kind of an interesting story. I was working at Channel 7 years ago. So it was like, I'm going to guess like 2000, year 2000, I think. And they made the announcement that they were going to give this land to the U.S. Fish and Game. And it was going to be cleaned up, and they were in the middle of it. And I remember having the guy standing on the bluff saying, over here, imagine golf courses and people riding horses and fishing, and, you know, and they're showing the land. And I'm sitting there going, laughing. I mean, it was like we're in the background. We're sitting in the newsroom laughing because because we're like, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's exactly
You know,
right. So
that's not going to happen.
last year in 2017, U.S. Fish and Wildlife did a dog and pony parade
Yes.
where they had 4 fake community meetings where they invited the community to
Fake news,
come
fake news, fake
and
news.
learn about the wildlife refuge and express concerns, except you couldn't express concerns and no public comment was taken.
Are you kidding?
I am not kidding. So after the very first meeting was very volatile, and after that they were very.
Was it the first one where they had the armed guards at the?
No, that was after that.
Okay.
So they have
Yeah.
armed guards at the meeting.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
after the first meeting,
the,
they had
wow.
they had armed Fish and Wildlife officers there
Wow.
to just.
Well-
So yeah, and at the final one, which was last spring.
I was going to say last fall.
No, it
but-
was last spring, and it was it was about a year ago because it was May, and they had another. Now everything's so great, and Department of Energy came out and said that they had 24/7 testing out there that tells you
Did they?
exactly what's happening and how much is going everywhere. That's fucking bullshit.
There you go.
That's bullshit.
That's okay. You can say this is a
This is
Oh,
a
yeah,
podcast.
And you know what? If there ever was a time when, yeah, it's okay.
Oh, my blood was boiling. And
Yeah, that is
the,
bullshit.
The
Yeah.
news agencies caught it when I stood up and it started shouting very loudly at everyone and saying, "Where's the science? What the hell is this shit? Why aren't you guys talking about the plutonium that's out there? Everything's fine. Nothing to see here." It was grotesque.
Oh yeah, that's. I don't know how people live with themselves. I mean, seriously, I do not know how they sleep at night if they are aware that this is a cover-up, and that they are aware that they are putting people's health at risk. Are they just that damn dumb? They don't know. Are they don't care? Is it a combination of dumb and don't care?
We often wonder the same thing. We're like,
But
what?
you have to remember.
Like, what would be
I do that a lot lately. I watch the news. What's
just
what's wrong with
the flabbergasted? Yeah.
I've simply come to terms with the fact that
It is what it is.
ignorance is bliss.
Mhm. Well, it's much easier to say I grew up there. I don't have any problems, than
Yes.
and not deal with it than it is to say, oh my God, and I'm
What
going to
do we
sell my
do?
house. I'm going to get rid of
Right,
everything.
exactly.
You know.
And no, that's exactly right. So being with Candelas Glows, we hear from the people that live there or that are looking at it. And so some of the people that live there are longtime Arvada residents.
Yeah.
They love it. They are so excited to have like nice, new, beautiful homes. They don't know anyone who's sick, and they've never.
And they might not.
And they think everything's fine. And so exactly. And so, you know, they're happy for it, and then you have other people that are like, "Oh my God, what did I just do? Oh my God, just pretend like okay, I just can't think about it. It's too overwhelming. I put $60,000 down on this house. That's all of the money I have. You know, and they're in it and they're stuck.
Yeah.
And so you know, we see the gamut, and it's everything from just please, I just can't. It's too overwhelming. To I don't believe you.
Yeah. And I think that it's easier to have plausible denial because you've got to resell that house.
Oh,
Yes.
And so, like, if you want out, you got to sell it. It's not
Mhm.
like we're all rich.
Yeah.
So you got to keep your mouth shut and sell it, and that's the problem.
And that's where we
That's-
need better government. We need better nuclear waste policies for the government. And you know, where we come into these legacy sites and we say, "Oops, our bad." And you know what? Instead of putting our human populace at risk, we're going to buy y'all out and nobody lives there, and it's done, and that would be responsible. But this
That would
is
be
America.
responsible.
I
Yeah,
was
that would
wondering
be.
if we had a minute, can you go ahead and describe your firsthand experience when, I believe it was Carl, when you were asking him about the hot spots, and he said, well, something to the effect of,
We have
I
hand
would-
talkers here, so they keep looking.
Yeah, I apologize.
It's okay.
Where he basically said, like, that hot spot, we're ignoring it.
Yes. So that was the fire. So okay, they
Right.
wanted to do a controlled burn because Fish and Wildlife. They
No. Back the bus up. They want to burn
yes.
Well,
that ground.
So it's yes. So this
Oh,
is so
boy.
this was 2015. I mean, every year it was like we would gear up for another fight of
Yeah.
some other ludicrous idea, and so it's been ongoing. And so this year they're going to open the wildlife refuge. But so before that, they wanted to do a controlled burn to mitigate the weeds, and also it's practice for the Fish and Wildlife Service to get their rangers out there to work on fire mitigation. And so they were like, oh, we have a wildlife refuge. Let's do the Rocky
of
Flats.
course.
And so they had this public meeting where the Colorado Department of Health got up and they put up a big slide on the screen and they said, this is how much plutonium is in the field that you guys are going to burn.
On the
No-
surface.
No one's denying.
So they're not
there's
denying there's plutonium.
Yes,
They're just
and
saying this
there's
is how much.
hot spots of so most of it was normal, but there was hot spots of like 17 picocuries, which background is 0.02 picocuries. So
That's
we're
pretty high.
talking,
That's pretty high.
a couple hundred times background. And so, he gets up there and he's like, okay, so, but if you just ignore those hot spots, Colorado Department of Health, Carl Sprang, paid for by the DOE, gets up there, says, here's the hot spots. But if you just ignore them, guess what? The averages
Yeah.
for the wildlife refuge are now under allowable limits. Just by omitting, the hot spots. I was like,
They really said this. So,
you
let me
cannot make this up.
So let me say this. Let me just reiterate this, and you tell me if I've got this right. There were hot spots that were hundreds of times
Yes.
higher.
Yep.
The rest of the ground was kind of okay.
Yeah.
We're going to do a burn. Oh, it's too hot for us to burn because it might throw particles in the air. Blah blah blah. Well, but if we just ignore these few areas, then it's fine. So we'll do it anyway.
That's how we reach our acceptable average.
Yeah. So that's
So they average it. But
that's
but you can't do that with something that'll kill you. That's like that's like averaging. Okay, I'll tell you what. We're going to average the murders, and there's 3.
Yeah.
But if you're standing there, a guy sticking a knife in you, you're
yes, and that's why when they want to open this wildlife refuge, and the kids are going to go out there, and we're like,
and they're going to be on the hot spot.
Yeah.
But
if you average it out, it's
It's fine.
totally safe.
but the kid that might run out in the hot spot's in
and
trouble.
skin their knee, and
Oh yeah, you get one of those particles in your leg's gone.
yeah,
It won't take that long.
exactly, and especially for kids
Yeah.
because they're
They're
growth.
growing.
Yep,
Yeah, it won't take that long.
Yep. exactly.
Because there are stories of kids that lived in those farms that
Mhm.
fell and they'd get a piece of plutonium in their knees and they'd have to get their legs cut off.
And one
And
thing
that's actually, we reported on that when I was, the station reported on that when I worked
Wow.
at 7.
One thing I worry about as the new children in these brand new subdivisions as they get older, right around that high school age, we know how teenagers get, and technically the only barrier
Yeah.
between the actual Superfund site and the refuge is a chain link fence.
Oh, they'll go over
Not
that.
even chain link.
We did it when we were kids.
Low-
I mean, you know,
Low
we didn't know.
3. It's a 3-foot barbed wire
Oh yeah,
fence
who would go over
with
that?
signs that
Or
say
under.
DOE, government property, keep off. That's it.
Because
No nuclear waste
Yeah.
weapons facility, no hazardous to your health, no Superfund site, keep out, nothing. Just
they'll be
government
out
property, keep off.
there having their woodsies. You know?
Yeah.
But I mean, we did that at like I said, at Stanley Lake. It was all roped off and bar. It wasn't even private, open to the public back then.
Yeah.
We all went over the thing and went into it because you don't know. That's what kids do.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we are getting close to an end here. I think, right, Henry? We have to-
We're about
Yeah, we can go
4
on and
minutes.
on.
4 more minutes. Yeah, we'll go. So
Well,
a few more minutes.
keep us
We'll
going.
start.
Four more
Right,
minutes.
exactly.
We're going to start wrapping it up.
Okay.
I want to, first of all, as we wrap it up, I want to say thank you. I believe this is a very critical public health issue. That it is, again, I will restate that it's a public health issue for those of us who grew up and currently live in the area, in and around that area. I also believe that it's a lesson we need to take with us all over the country and all over the world. We have to pay attention to what people are doing to our land and our water and our food. because it's getting us, folks. And if you don't believe it, just look around and see how many people have had cancer and other illnesses that can be directly related to not taking care of our land.
Yeah.
You know, so,
No, that's
so
right.
thank you, Alicia. Alicia.
Yeah,
No,
Alicia.
Alicia. I love that name. It's Russian, right?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, the Russians are here.
Yes, they
Oh,
are.
okay, that's it. That's it.
I'm
And,
a Cold War kid.
and we want to thank you for having us. Opportunities like this have greatly helped us in the last 3 years watch our public appreciation and agreement significantly grow. When 3 years ago, when we first got together and started doing this type of activism, there were some hurtful things said to us, and now it's just so much overwhelmingly positive.
Well, and that's like when people made fun of all the people that used to protest it, and
Of
they were all
course.
right, you know.
Yeah.
And I want to give a big plug for Christine Iverson's book, Full Body Burden. If you haven't read that, if you grew up in the area, you want information on what really went on, that's a great book to read. It's a great factual book put together by a person who lived here
And she actually worked there.
and worked there.
Another significantly important book would be The Ambushed Grand Jury.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we have another whole show on that
That's
one.
a whole
Yes.
other.
Yeah, yes, just read that book.
Yeah.
When they took the grand jury, you couldn't talk about it. They couldn't
Yep.
release the data. They
Yep.
still don't have some of that data.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Exactly.
It's crazy. All right, well, we're just wrapping it up. I want to thank you for being my guest. I want to invite you
you.
back as the lawsuit progresses
Absolutely.
to let us
Love
know what's
that,
going
yeah.
on, even if it's for a 15-minute thing, just to
Yeah.
update us. And I do want you to tell me if you're going out there, and we're going to
Okay.
Okay.
lay on that ground, and we're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
let me know,
Block the
because
bulldozers.
I'll go and block bulldozers
Yep.
with you all day
Thank
long.
you.
And
Thank you.
Henry, will you let me broadcast live if we do that?
Sure.
There we go. Henry's back here. He's been quiet today.
And then also there's an exhibit up at the Boulder Public Library called Facing Rocky Flats. And it's going through June 10th. I would invite everyone to go
That's
up there
great.
and check it out. There's some really good dynamic art. Some of it's by Jeff Geib, who is a local Colorado artist who's done the Cold War horse. If you're not familiar with that, that is a horse in a hazmat suit that's over off of Highway 72. That is the only signage about Rocky Flats.
Right.
And then follow us on candelasglows.com or Candelas Glows Facebook.
Thank you.
We're on Facebook.
Thank you for being on the WTF show. I'm Rhonda Shea, and we're on KUHSdenver.com. And thanks for tuning in. Next week, we'll be back to the music and a little bit of fake news and some news like this that should be fake, but it's real.
Oh my God, I love that.
That was so much fun. It went so fast.
I know, I couldn't believe it.
I was like looking